turn out defective products.
Dr. Green, I want to ask you this because I can think of fewer people who have greater passion than you. I said just before we started taping, if anybody can fix this, I'm sure it would have to be you. How are we going to begin to make the differences that we need to make so that we can turn this system around? How do we do that?
I would love to be able to have the ability to correct the system. And we don't look at some of the things that I think need to be taken care of before we have a system that really works and functions.
For example?
We do not look at the discrimination that takes place in the system. We talk about the fact that we have so many people in prison, but we don't look very carefully at why most of those people are African Americans and Latinos.
And those statistics, by the way, Dr. Green, I pulled them up and I didn't bring them this morning, but the statistics, what is it? It's incredibly high. It's disproportionate to the population at large, obviously.
Right. For instance, in New York State, we have about 23% of the population are African American and Latino. However, in prison, the statistics are that 85% of the prison population is African American and Latino.
Why is that, Dr. Green?
And it doesn't happen, it does not mean that they commit 85% of the crime. But unfortunately, African Americans and Latinos are disproportionately involved in certain kinds of crime, street crime, for instance. But there are all kinds of decisions made about who goes to prison. In drug cases, we know that the white population is much more involved in illegal drug activity, yet 85 to 95% of the people in prison for drug offenses are African American and Latino. So there's a selective process that goes on, and that's the discrimination piece that we never look at. You know, we select who is monitored and who is, where surveillance is in terms of the drug problem, and those are the people who are selected to go into the prison.
Dr. Green, you know, we're out of time, but next time you have to come for at least, what, 45 minutes, because there's so much to talk about. I appreciate your insight. And obviously a lot of information and a lot of work to do. But I'm sure by the next time we tape, you're going to have it all figured out, because I trust that you're going to correct all these terrible deficiencies. Thank you for coming down and talking to us today. I do wish we had more time. And by the way, if you have questions about the Choosing to Lose prevention program, or if you'd like some additional information, you can reach the New York State Correctional Officers and Police Benevolent Association at 518-427-1551, or visit them online at www.nyscopba.org. And to reach the Center for Law and Justice, you can call 518-427-8361, or visit them online at www.timesunion.com/communities/CJLJ.
This week on Inside Albany, Pataki enlists crime victims. Ending parole and collecting DNA from all convicted felons are part of a familiar 32-bill crime agenda.
I've been a volunteer victim advocate for over 17 years since my daughter Mary, as Senator Bruno said, was murdered in California.
Senate Republicans and Governor Pataki held separate events to mark National Crime Victims' Rights Week.
Terrorized, beaten, raped, sodomized, bound, robbed. The words themselves render horrible visions of my rape of August 3rd, 1994.
The testimony of Charlene Vaughn and Patricia Joya provided the emotion to turn up the heat on Democrats, whom Pataki and Bruno said are blocking what they call their common sense crime proposals. Pataki said he had introduced 32 crime bills. The Senate has passed most of them, as well as some of their own.
A lot of these bills we passed last year, well, they're not law, and we need to get them into law.
But there's been more talk than compromise on crime legislation, whether it's reform of the Rockefeller drug laws or on Pataki bills to eliminate the statute of limitations for rape and other violent crimes, or to extend the collection of DNA samples and the end of parole for all felons, not just the violent ones. And then there's the long and growing list of legislation that gets personalized. Jones Law, Suzanne's Law, Tamikwa's Law. It's shorthand that fits on campaign flyers, and this is a legislative election year. To the governor, the answer is simple.
And the best way to help during National Crime Victims' Rights Week is to do everything in our power to see that there are fewer victims of crime. this legislative package would do that.
The Pataki event was held in a low-income, high-crime, mostly black Arbor Hill neighborhood in Albany. Alice Green, a frequent Pataki critic on crime issues, questioned the location and the attendees.
Could I ask you the significance of having this press conference here in the black community when you have standing behind you total white law enforcement?
Because when you read the accounts time and after time of violent crime, it so often hits those most vulnerable, immigrants, minorities, the low income, the poor, who can't afford to move to a place where you can have private security or where you don't have the fears that you do in some of our communities. So this legislation is not as important if you live on Park Avenue as if you live in Arbor Hill.
Pataki's response didn't win over Green.
But it's certainly insulting to have every law enforcement officer here who's white, every victim that stood up there was white, and yet they come here and they say that we're concerned about the fact that there's high victimization in this community. Yet we don't even acknowledge it.
Any of those bills that you would support?
Absolutely not, because they all are law enforcement bills that are designed to increase the mass incarceration of people.
This issue of crime and race is a long festering sore that needs to be honestly addressed by blacks and whites. It may be a big part of the resistance to Pataki's crime agenda.
That's it for this week on Inside Albany.